It was a chilly autumn afternoon, and the air outside carried that crisp, cool feeling that makes you want to wrap yourself in a warm sweater. The hallways of Hillside High were buzzing with the usual chaos. Students rushing between classes, lockers slamming shut, and laughter echoing off the walls. Among the crowd, one girl stood out, though not for the reasons you might think. She wasn't the most popular or the loudest. In fact, she was quite the opposite. This girl was quiet, almost invisible to most people. But today she was struggling more than usual. Her name wasn't important, but her story was. Let's just call her the girl with the broken leg. A few weeks ago, she'd been playing soccer during gym class when she tripped and fell awkwardly. The injury had left her with a cast on her leg and 2 crutches to help her get around. For someone who already felt like they didn't fit in, this new challenge made life even harder. Every step felt like an obstacle course, and every hallway seemed narrower than before. But she kept moving forward, determined not to let her injury define her. As she made her way down the crowded corridor, balancing carefully on her crutches, a group of students caught her attention. They weren't hard to notice. They were always at the center of things, laughing louder than everyone else and drawing all the eyes in the room. Leading the pack was a boy who thought he ruled the school. He was tall, athletic, and had that kind of confidence that came from being the star quarterback. People called him by his last name, Reynolds, because it sounded cooler that way. To many, he was untouchable, a guy who could do no wrong. But to others, he was something else entirely, a bully. Reynolds and his friends were leaning against the lockers, joking around and shoving each other playfully. As the girl approached, trying to navigate past them without causing a scene, Reynolds noticed her. At first, it seemed like he might ignore her, but then a smirk spread across his face. Something about her struggle amused him. Maybe it was the way she wobbled slightly as she moved, or maybe it was just the fact that she looked so different from everyone else. Whatever it was, it sparked an idea in his mind, an idea that would change both their lives forever. Without warning, Reynolds lifted his foot and gave one of her crutches a sharp kick. It happened so fast that she barely had time to react. One moment she was steadying herself, and the next she was falling. Her crutches clattered to the floor and she landed hard on her side, pain shooting through her already injured leg. The books she'd been carrying scattered across the hallway, papers fluttering everywhere like leaves in the wind. For a moment, everything went silent. Even the laughter stopped as everyone turned to look at what had just happened. The girl lay there stunned and embarrassed, her cheeks burning red. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never come back. But instead, she forced herself to sit up, clutching her leg and trying to hold back tears. Around her, the other students stared, some whispering to each other, others pretending not to notice. No one stepped forward to help, not even the teachers who were supposed to be keeping an eye on things. And Reynolds? He just stood there, smirking like he'd done something clever. "Watch where you're going next time," he said casually, as if knocking someone over was no big deal. Then, without another word, he walked away with his friends, leaving the girl alone on the cold, hard floor. For a while, she stayed there, too overwhelmed to move. Her heart raced, not just from the fall, but from the humiliation of it all. She hated feeling weak, hated being the person everyone pitied, or worse, ignored. Slow faces started to blur together as tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She wouldn't cry here, not in front of everyone. Instead, she reached for her crutches, gritting her teeth as she pulled herself back up. It wasn't easy, and it hurt more than she cared to admit, but she managed to stand. One shaky step at a time, she gathered her belongings and limped toward the nearest empty classroom, desperate to escape the stares and whispers. Inside, she leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her grip on the crutches, and her leg throbbed painfully beneath the cast. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. Why did people like Reynolds exist? Why did they feel the need to make others feel small? These questions swirled in her mind, but she had no answers. All she knew was that this day was one she wouldn't forget anytime soon. Little did she know, though, that this incident was only the beginning. What Reynolds had done wouldn't just fade away. It would ripple outward, touching lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Because sometimes, actions have consequences that reach far beyond the moment they occur. And when the girl's mom found out what had happened, well, let's just say Reynolds was about to learn that lesson the hard way. By the time the final bell rang, the girl was exhausted. Not just from the physical effort of getting around on crutches, but from the emotional weight of the day. She had managed to avoid Reynolds and his friends for the rest of the afternoon, sticking to quieter hallways and ducking into classrooms whenever she saw them coming. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the memory of what had happened. Every time she thought about it, her stomach churned and her hands tightened around the handles of her crutches. When she finally stepped outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. She pulled her jacket closer, wishing she could disappear into its folds. Home felt impossibly far away, but she forced herself to start walking, one slow, painful step at a time. Each movement reminded her of the fall, the sharp pain in her leg, the sting of humiliation, and the sound of Reynolds's laughter ringing in her ears. It wasn't fair, none of it was fair. And yet here she was, trying to act like everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. She lived with her mom, who worked long hours as a nurse at a nearby hospital. Her mom was the kind of person who always put others first, whether it was her patients, her coworkers, or her daughter. The girl admired her strength, but she also knew how hard her mom worked to keep things together. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that meant everything. Still, she hated burdening her mom with her problems. She wanted to be strong, independent, someone her mom could be proud of. But today she wasn't sure she could hold it all in. When she walked through the door, her mom was already home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in hand. She looked tired, her scrubs still on from work, but she smiled warmly when she saw her daughter. "Hey, sweetie," she said, her voice soft and comforting. "How was your day?" The girl hesitated. For a moment she considered brushing off the question with a simple, "It was fine," like she usually did. But something about the way her mom looked at her, really looked at her, made it impossible to lie. Instead, she set her crutches against the wall and sank into a chair, tears welling up in her eyes before she could stop them. Her mom's expression changed instantly. "What's wrong?" she asked, leaning forward with concern. "Did something happen?" The girl nodded, struggling to find the words. "It's stupid," she mumbled, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "I don't want to bother you." Her mom reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not bothering me," she said firmly. "Tell me what happened." So, the girl told her everything. From the crowded hallway to Reynolds's cruel smirk, from the kick that sent her sprawling to the silence of the students who watched it all unfold. As she spoke, her voice trembled, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. By the time she finished, her mom's jaw was clenched and her eyes were blazing with anger. "That boy did what?" her mom demanded, her voice rising. "He kicked your crutch? On purpose?" The girl nodded again, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. Relief because she'd finally shared the truth, and guilt because she knew how protective her mom could be. She braced herself for the lecture she was sure would come next. The reminders to stand up for herself, to report bullies, to fight back. But instead, her mom surprised her. "Okay," her mom said, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow I'm going to that school and I'm going to talk to whoever needs to hear this. This isn't just bullying, it's dangerous. What if you'd hit your head? What if you'd hurt yourself even worse? That boy needs to understand that he can't treat people this way." The girl's eyes widened. "Mom, no," she protested. "You don't have to do that, it'll make things worse." Her mom shook her head. "No, sweetheart, this isn't just about you anymore. If we let this slide, he'll think it's okay to do the same thing to someone else, and I won't stand for that." The determination in her mom's voice left no room for argument. The girl knew there was no point in trying to change her mind once she got like this. Her mom had always been fiercely protective ever since she was little. There was a reason for that. Her mom had faced bullies of her own growing up, kids who teased her for being smart or for wearing hand-me-down clothes. Those experiences had shaped her into the strong, compassionate woman she was today, and they had taught her one thing above all else: no one should have to suffer in silence. As the evening wore on, the girl tried to distract herself by focusing on homework, but her thoughts kept drifting back to what her mom had said. She imagined the confrontation, her mom marching into the principal's office demanding justice, making Reynolds squirm. Part of her felt guilty for putting her mom in that position, but another part couldn't deny that it felt good to know someone had her back. For so long she'd felt invisible, like no one cared enough to notice what she was going through. But now she realized she wasn't alone. Her mom cared, more than anything. Before bed, her mom came into her room and sat on the edge of her mattress. "I know this is hard," she said gently. "But remember, you didn't do anything wrong. You're brave for telling me, and you're stronger than you think. Tomorrow, we'll handle this together." The girl nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. She appreciated her mom's confidence, but she couldn't shake the fear of what might happen next. Would Reynolds apologize, or would he double down, blaming her for making a big deal out of nothing? Would the other students side with him, thinking she was overreacting? Or worse, would they pity her, treating her like some fragile thing that needed to be handled with care? Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Reynolds' smirk, heard the thud of her crutches hitting the floor, felt the sting of embarrassment all over again. But mixed in with those memories was something else, a flicker of hope. Maybe her mom was right. Maybe standing up for herself, even if it was scary, was the first step toward making things better. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow wouldn't be as bad as she feared. Little did she know, her mom had plans of her own, plans that would send shockwaves through the school and leave Reynolds regretting every decision he'd ever made. Because sometimes protecting the ones you love means doing whatever it takes, no matter the cost. The next morning, the girl woke up with a knot in her stomach. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. Her mom had promised to handle things, but that didn't make her feel any less nervous. What if Reynolds denied everything? What if no one believed her? These questions swirled in her head as she got ready for school, each movement feeling heavier than the last. Her mom was already dressed in her scrubs, looking every bit the professional nurse she was. But today there was something different about her, something fierce in her eyes that said she wasn't going to back down. "We're doing this together," her mom said firmly as they drove to school. "You don't have to say a word if you don't want to. Just let me do the talking." When they arrived at Hillside High, the parking lot was buzzing with students chatting and laughing like it was any other day. For a moment, the girl wished she could blend into the background and pretend none of this was happening. But her mom gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before heading straight toward the main office. The receptionist looked up, surprised to see them so early, but nodded when her mom asked to speak with the principal. Principal Thompson was a tall man with thinning gray hair and a tired expression. He seemed like someone who had seen it all during his years at the school, from minor scuffles to major scandals. When he ushered them into his office, he offered a polite smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Carter?" her mom replied, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. "I'm here because my daughter was injured yesterday, not by accident, but because another student deliberately targeted her." The principal's eyebrows shot up. "Injured? Can you explain what happened?" Her mom wasted no time laying out the details. She described how the boy had kicked the girl's crutch, causing her to fall and hurt herself even more. She pulled out photos on her phone, close-ups of the bruises forming on her daughter's knees, and placed them on the desk. "This isn't just bullying," her mom said, her voice steady but sharp. "This is reckless behavior that could have caused serious harm. My daughter is lucky she didn't hit her head or break something else." Principal Thompson frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Carter, but these kinds of incidents are complicated. We'll need to hear both sides before deciding." Before he could finish, the door opened and Reynolds walked in. He looked confident, strutting in like he owned the place until he saw the girl sitting there with her mom. His smirk faltered for a split second, but then it returned, bigger and cockier than ever. "Oh, hey," he said casually, plopping into the chair opposite them. What's this about? Her mom turned to look at him, her gaze piercing. It's about how you deliberately hurt my daughter yesterday, she said, her tone icy. And, I want to know why you thought that was acceptable. Reynolds shrugged, leaning back in his chair like he didn't have a care in the world. I didn't mean to hurt her, he said with a careless laugh. She tripped over her own feet, not my fault she can't walk right. The girl felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. How could he twist the truth like that? But her mom didn't miss a beat. That's not what happened and you know it, she shot back. Your actions were intentional and they were cruel. And now you're going to face the consequences. Reynolds rolled his eyes, clearly thinking this was just another lecture he could shrug off. But then her mom dropped a bombshell. You might think you're untouchable, but let me tell you something. I work at St. Mary's Hospital, ever heard of it? It's where your dad was admitted last month for heart issues, a fact that's supposed to be confidential thanks to patient privacy laws. If I wanted to, I could make sure everyone knows about his condition and why it matters. The room went silent. Even Principal Thompson looked stunned. Reynolds froze, his smirk vanishing completely. For the first time, he looked genuinely scared. You wouldn't, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Try me, her mom replied, her tone calm but laced with steel. Because, if you don't take responsibility for what you've done, I won't hesitate to expose your family's secrets. This isn't just about my daughter anymore. It's about teaching you a lesson you won't forget. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing between her mom and the principal. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Whatever bravado he'd walked in with was gone now, replaced by panic. Principal Thompson cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Look, Reynolds, I think it's best if you apologize publicly, and maybe consider some community service or counseling to reflect on your actions. Otherwise. He trailed off, letting the threat hang in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then reluctantly Reynolds muttered, Fine, I'm sorry. But her mom wasn't satisfied. An apology means nothing unless you mean it, she said, turning to the girl. Do you accept his apology? The girl hesitated. She wanted to believe he was sincere, but his words felt hollow. Finally, she shook her head. No, she said softly. He doesn't mean it. Her mom nodded, unsurprised. Then we'll keep moving forward until he does. As they left the office, the girl couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. For once, someone had stood up for her, not just with words, but with action. Her mom had shown her that she didn't have to face bullies alone, that there was power in speaking up. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Reynolds might have backed down today, but would he really change? Or would he find new ways to lash out? By lunchtime, news of the confrontation had spread through the school like wildfire. Students whispered about how the girl's mom had threatened to expose Reynolds' family secrets, and teachers began treating him differently, watching his every move. For the first time in his life, Reynolds found himself isolated, his friends distancing themselves as rumors swirled around him. The girl noticed the change too. People who had ignored her before suddenly smiled or said hello in the hallways. Some even apologized for not stepping in when Reynolds had knocked her down. It was strange, almost surreal, to go from being invisible to being noticed. But she didn't trust it, not yet. She knew kindness born out of guilt wasn't the same as genuine compassion. Meanwhile, her mom kept a close eye on things, checking in with her after school and making sure she was okay. We're not done, her mom told her one evening. Bullies, like him, don't change overnight. But we've planted a seed. Now it's up to him to decide whether he wants to grow or stay stuck where he is. The girl nodded, feeling a mix of hope and uncertainty. She didn't know what the future held, but for now she was grateful to have her mom by her side. Together they had taken the first step toward holding Reynolds accountable, and maybe, just maybe, that accountability would lead to real change, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been hurt by his actions. The days that followed the meeting with the principal were strange for everyone at Hillside High. For the boy who thought he was untouchable, life suddenly felt like it was spiraling out of control. He had always been the center of attention, the guy everyone looked up to, the one who could do no wrong. But now whispers followed him wherever he went. People stared when he passed by, their eyes filled with curiosity, judgment, and sometimes even pity. It was a side of life he wasn't used to, and it ate away at him. At first he tried to brush it off. He told himself it didn't matter what anyone thought. They'll forget about it soon enough, he muttered under his breath as he walked down the hallway. But deep down he knew it wasn't true. The damage had been done. His reputation, his identity, was cracking, piece by piece. Friends who once laughed at his jokes now avoided eye contact. Teachers who used to give him a free pass started calling him out in class. Even his teammates on the football team began questioning his leadership. Reynolds wasn't just losing respect. He was losing himself. Nights became sleepless battles with guilt and anger. He tossed and turned in bed, replaying the scene in the principal's office over and over again. That mom, she had cornered him, backed him into a place where there was no escape. She hadn't raised her voice or made wild threats, but her words had cut deeper than anything else ever had. And worst of all, she was right. What he'd done was cruel. It was intentional, and he couldn't deny it anymore. One evening, sitting alone in his room, Reynolds dug through an old shoebox tucked away in his closet. Inside were pictures from years ago, photos of him as a kid before high school, before fame and popularity changed him. There was one picture in particular that caught his eye, a younger version of himself grinning ear to ear, holding a trophy from a middle school science fair. Back then he cared more about making cool volcanoes explode with baking soda and vinegar than being the star quarterback. Life seemed simpler, easier. People liked him not because he was popular, but because he was kind. He stared at the photo for a long time, wondering how he'd gone from that happy, curious kid to someone who kicked crutches out from under another person. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of who he really was. The realization hit him hard, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. Maybe he wasn't the hero everyone thought he was. Maybe he was just a bully. But acknowledging the problem wasn't enough. Reynolds knew he needed to do something real, to fix the mess he'd created. So the next day, he decided to take a step most people wouldn't expect from someone like him. He signed up to volunteer at a local community center after school. It wasn't glamorous work, helping kids with disabilities play sports, but it gave him a chance to make amends, even if indirectly. On his first day, he met a young girl named Mia. She was around 10 years old, with curly hair and a bright smile that lit up the room. Mia had cerebral palsy, which made it difficult for her to walk without assistance, but that didn't stop her from trying her best at every activity. Watching her struggle yet refuse to give up reminded him of the girl with the broken leg, the one he'd humiliated in front of everyone. Guilt washed over him again, heavier this time. Mia's enthusiasm was infectious, though, and slowly, Reynolds found himself opening up. At first, he kept his distance, unsure of how to interact with kids who had challenges so different from his own. But as the weeks went by, he started learning their names, cheering them on during games, and even joining in when they needed an extra hand. One afternoon, while helping Mia practice shooting hoops in her wheelchair, she turned to him and said, "You're good at this. Thanks for being here." Her words took him by surprise. No one had thanked him for anything in months. For the first time since the incident, he felt a flicker of hope, a small but powerful reminder that maybe he could still be someone worth looking up to. Helping these kids wasn't just about redemption. It was about rediscovering the parts of himself he'd forgotten. Meanwhile, back at school, the girl with the broken leg was beginning to heal, not just physically, but emotionally too. Her mom continued to support her every step of the way, reminding her that strength comes in many forms. Some days were harder than others, especially when she saw Reynolds walking down the hallway or heard people talking about him behind his back. But she also noticed subtle changes in how people treated her. Classmates who had ignored her before now went out of their way to hold doors open or offer to carry her books. Teachers praised her resilience, and even her closest friends seemed more protective than usual. Still, forgiveness wasn't easy. When Reynolds approached her one afternoon, she wasn't sure what to expect. He stood awkwardly a few feet away, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "I owe you another apology, a real one this time." She crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I don't blame you for doubting me," he admitted. "But I've been volunteering at the community center, working with kids who have disabilities. It's made me realize how much I messed up, how much I hurt you. I'm sorry truly, and I want to make things right." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then reluctantly she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "I accept your apology, but words aren't enough. You have to prove it." Reynolds swallowed hard, nodding in agreement. "I will," he promised. "I'll do whatever it takes." As he walked away, the girl felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. Could he really change? Or was this just another act to save face? Only time would tell. But for now, she chose to focus on herself, on healing, growing stronger and finding joy in the little victories each day brought. Back home, her mom listened intently as she recounted the conversation. When she finished, her mom smiled faintly. "People can change," she said thoughtfully. "But change takes time. Keep your guard up, but don't close yourself off completely. Sometimes, second chances are worth giving." The girl nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe this chapter of her life wasn't just about pain and humiliation. Maybe it was also about growth, for both her and the boy who had once tried to tear her down. Whatever happened next, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. With her mom by her side and a newfound sense of strength within herself, she was ready to move forward, one step at a time. Weeks turned into months, and life at Hillside High began to settle into a new rhythm. For the boy who had once been the king of the school, things were far from normal. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, trying to balance his old self with the person he was trying to become. It wasn't easy. The stares and whispers hadn't stopped completely, but they had softened, replaced by cautious curiosity. People wanted to see if he was serious about changing or if this was just another phase. Reynolds spent most of his afternoons at the community center, helping kids with disabilities learn how to play sports. At first, it was awkward. He didn't know what to say or how to act around them. But over time, he started to relax. He realized these kids weren't looking for someone perfect. They just wanted someone who cared. And slowly, he found himself caring more than he ever thought possible. One afternoon, while working with Mia, the girl in the wheelchair, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Why do you come here?" she said, tilting her head as she looked up at him. Her voice was innocent, curious, but it carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I guess I'm trying to be better," he said finally, his voice quieter than usual. "I made some mistakes and I want to fix them." Mia smiled, her eyes lighting up. "That's cool," she said simply. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do next." Her words stayed with him long after their session ended. They reminded him of something the girl with the broken leg had said when he apologized. "Words aren't enough. You have to prove it." He knew she was right. Apologies were just the beginning. Real change required action and patience. At school, Reynolds tried to rebuild trust one small step at a time. He started sitting with different groups at lunch, not just his usual crowd. He joined study groups, offering to help classmates struggling with assignments. Some people appreciated his efforts. Others remained skeptical. But even the smallest gestures felt meaningful to him because they represented progress. For the girl with the broken leg, life was also shifting in unexpected ways. Physically, her leg was healing well. She no longer needed crutches, though she still moved cautiously, favoring her stronger side. Emotionally, however, she was learning to stand tall again, not just against bullies, but within herself. Her mom continued to be her rock, always reminding her of her worth and encouraging her to keep pushing forward. But there were still moments when doubt crept in. One evening, as she sat on the couch flipping through TV channels, she came across a clip of Reynolds being interviewed for the school newspaper. He was talking about his volunteer work at the community center, smiling brightly as he described how rewarding it was to help kids with disabilities. Part of her felt proud that he was using his influence for good. But another part of her wondered if it was all just for show. Was he truly sorry, or was he trying to repair his image? She decided to confront him about it the next day. When she saw him between classes, she called out, "Can we talk?" Reynolds turned, surprised but willing. "Sure," he said, stepping aside so they could talk privately. "I saw your interview," she began, crossing her arms. "It sounded nice, but I need to ask, are you doing all this because you really mean it? Or are you just trying to look better in front of everyone?" Her question hit him like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "At first, yeah. Maybe I did it because I wanted people to stop hating me. But now," he paused, searching for the right words. "Now I think I'm starting to understand why it matters. Helping those kids. It reminds me of what I lost when I became so focused on being popular. I hurt you because I thought power meant putting people down. But real strength comes from lifting others up." The honesty in his voice surprised her. She hadn't expected him to admit that his motives might have been selfish at first. Still, she wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "Okay," she said slowly. "If that's true, then keep going. Don't stop. Because if you do, it'll mean none of this was real." "I won't stop," he promised. "I promise." As the days passed, Reynolds kept his word. He threw himself into volunteering, mentoring younger students, and even organizing a fundraiser for the community center. His teammates noticed the change too. During practice, he encouraged players who were struggling instead of tearing them down. His coach pulled him aside one day and said, "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up. You're becoming the leader we've always needed." Meanwhile, the girl with the broken leg found her own sense of purpose. With her mom's encouragement, she joined the school's art club, rediscovering a passion she'd set aside years ago. Painting gave her a way to express emotions she couldn't put into words. Her artwork began to catch the attention of teachers and peers alike, earning her praise she hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as the girl who got knocked down, but as someone with talent and creativity. By spring, the atmosphere at Hillside High had shifted noticeably. The tension that had lingered after the incident faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. Students talked openly about kindness and accountability, inspired by the changes they'd witnessed in both Reynolds and the girl he'd hurt. Even Principal Thompson commented during an assembly, "We've all learned valuable lessons this year about responsibility, empathy, and growth. Let's carry those lessons forward." The annual charity gala arrived, bringing the entire school together for a night of music, food, and fundraising. As Reynolds stood near the entrance, greeting guests and handing out programs, he spotted the girl and her mom walking in. His heart raced. Would they acknowledge him? Ignore him? To his relief, they nodded politely, giving him a small smile, before moving inside. Later that evening, he worked up the courage to approach them. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere, "for everything. I know I can't undo what I did, but I hope someday you'll see that I've changed." The girl's mom studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, after a pause, she nodded. "Change takes time," she said gently, "but we'll be watching." Her words weren't a guarantee of forgiveness, but they were a sign of hope, a reminder that redemption isn't given freely, it's earned, step by step. As the night wore on, Reynolds returned to his duties, feeling lighter than he had in months. He didn't expect overnight miracles, but he believed in the possibility of a brighter future. For himself, for the girl he'd wronged, and for everyone else whose lives he touched along the way. And so, amidst laughter, applause, and shared stories, Hillside High took another step toward healing. Not everyone would forget what had happened, but perhaps that was okay. After all, scars remind us of where we've been and inspire us to move forward with greater care, compassion, and understanding. The charity gala marked a turning point, not just for Reynolds but for the entire school. It was one of those nights where everything felt different, like the air had shifted in a way that couldn't be ignored. The gymnasium, usually reserved for basketball games and pep rallies, was transformed into a warm, inviting space filled with twinkling lights, colorful decorations, and tables covered in white cloths. Students mingled with teachers, parents chatted with administrators, and even the shyest kids found themselves drawn into conversations they wouldn't normally have. Reynolds stood near the snack table, balancing plates of finger foods and trying to avoid spilling punch on his shirt. He wasn't used to being part of events like this. Normally he'd be hanging out with his football buddies or showing off his charm to anyone who would listen. But tonight, he was here as a volunteer, helping set up chairs, clean tables, and make sure everyone felt welcome. It was humbling work, but it gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Across the room, the girl who had once been knocked down by her crutches now sat at a table with her mom, laughing softly as she flipped through a photo album someone had brought to share memories from past school events. She looked lighter somehow, more at ease. Her leg had healed completely, and while she still carried the emotional scars of what had happened, she seemed stronger because of them. Her mom watched her closely, pride shining in her eyes. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving. As the evening went on, Reynolds kept glancing over at their table, unsure if he should approach again. Earlier, when he'd thanked them, their response had been polite but distant. He understood why. They had no reason to trust him yet. Still, he wanted to try one more time before the night ended. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed 2 cups of punch and walked over. "Mind if I join you?" he asked hesitantly, holding out the drinks. The girl looked up, surprised but not unwelcoming. After a moment, she nodded. "Sure." Her mom raised an eyebrow but didn't object as Reynolds pulled up a chair and sat down. For a while, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was more like they were all waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, Reynolds broke the quiet. "I just wanted to say, this year has changed me. More than I ever thought possible." He glanced at the girl, then at her mom. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I hope someday you'll believe that I'm trying to be better. Not for show, but because it's the right thing to do." The girl studied him carefully, her expression thoughtful. Then, after a pause, she said, "It's not easy to forgive someone who hurt you, and honestly, I don't know if I'm ready to fully forgive you yet, but..." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I see that you're working hard to change. That counts for something." Her mom nodded slowly, adding, "Change doesn't happen overnight. Trust takes time. But we're willing to give you that chance, as long as you keep proving yourself." Reynolds let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. He hadn't expected forgiveness so soon, but hearing that they were open to giving him a chance meant more than he could put into words. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I won't let you down." Later that night, as the gala wound down and people began heading home, Reynolds lingered behind to help clean up. As he stacked chairs and swept the floor, he reflected on how far he'd come since that cold autumn afternoon when he'd kicked a crutch out from under someone. Back then, he'd been reckless, arrogant, and blind to the impact of his actions. Now he was learning to be patient, humble, and aware of the power he held to either hurt or help others. The girl and her mom left early, waving goodbye as they stepped outside. On the drive home, the girl leaned back in her seat, staring out the window at the stars scattered across the sky. "Do you think he really means it?" she asked softly. Her mom smiled faintly, keeping her eyes on the road. "People are complicated. Sometimes they surprise us for better or worse. All we can do is watch, wait, and hold them accountable when they slip up." "I guess that makes sense," the girl replied, though she still felt uncertain. Forgiveness wasn't something you handed out easily, especially when the wound ran so deep. But she also knew that holding on to anger forever wouldn't heal her. It would only weigh her down. Letting go little by little might be the only way to move forward. By the time summer arrived, Hillside High felt like a different place. Reynolds continued volunteering at the community center, mentoring younger students and organizing events to raise awareness about inclusivity and kindness. His teammates joked that he was becoming a softie, but secretly they admired him for it. Even the girl who had once dreaded seeing him in the hallway now greeted him with a small smile when their paths crossed. One sunny afternoon, as graduation approached, the girl sat on a bench outside the school, sketching in her notebook. Reynolds spotted her and hesitated before walking over. "Hey," he said, sitting down beside her. "What are you drawing?" She showed him a picture of the school surrounded by blooming flowers with tiny figures of students walking hand in hand. "It's kind of cheesy," she admitted with a laugh, "but it reminds me of how much things have changed around here." "It's beautiful," Reynolds said sincerely. "You're really talented." "Thanks," she replied, blushing slightly. After a moment, she added, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you decided to change. It's made a difference, not just for me, but for everyone." He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "That means a lot. Thanks for believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." As the days turned into weeks, both of them prepared to leave Hillside High behind and step into the unknown future ahead. For the girl, it was a fresh start, a chance to chase dreams she'd almost forgotten about. For Reynolds, it was an opportunity to prove that the person he'd become was here to stay. And for the rest of the school, well, they had learned something too, that redemption isn't just about saying sorry, it's about choosing to grow, to listen, and to build bridges instead of walls. Life is messy, complicated, and full of second chances, but it's also full of hope. And sometimes, that hope starts with a single step toward becoming better.